Imagine opening your email to find years of history deleted. Only a single email remains. A ransomware request for $2 million. You think to yourself, how could this happen to me? You see, there's two types of companies. Those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. The weight of responsibility comes crashing down on you. It's the sort of responsibility you feel when your family is craving a delicious pizza. You finally open the box only to find the most cringe-worthy topping that you mistakenly ordered. Join Pineapple on Pizza podcast as John and George, along with guest executives, discuss the most common and craziest cybersecurity risks, followed by actionable tips and strategies that can be implemented to protect your cyber risk pie. Pineapple on Pizza is hosted by Omnistruct. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pineapple on Pizza. George Usey and John Riley were your hosts here. Today we have an amazing guest who is a literary lover who lives in a world of stories, and someone who's basically looking for a cozy nest to settle in on the East Coast at some point, but today hails from Long Beach. And I wanted to introduce you to Chief Executive Officer of Ways2H, Jean-Louis Kindler. So welcome, Jean-Louis, to our Pineapple on Pizza episode.
Thank you, George. Thank you, John, for having me today. Well, it's Friday afternoon, so I guess it will be an interesting conversation anyway.
Well, we hope so. You know, we definitely tend to be a little, I guess the word is cheesy, as we would say, on Fridays, but you know, it is later in the day today, so I think we're all ready to go home and or if we're already working from home, go into the drink cabinet and, you know, have our libations, so to speak. But we're going to get started with what essentially is our trademark. Is it trademark, John? I'm not even sure. Our question that we ask at every podcast at the beginning, and that is, if cyber risk was a pizza and the frameworks that are used make up the crust, what is the riskiest topping that you have seen, and what topping would you equate it to?
Now I understand why you say that this question or this podcast might be a little cheesy, because we're talking about pizza, right? Well,
saucy, Jim.
Well, you know, I grew up in a country where we were extremely proud of our infrastructure and of our nuclear power. And we certainly won't go into a debate whether nuclear is good or not. I have my opinion on that, and I can answer questions, but it's not the topic today. I've been in the US for about 8 years now, and what I have always been very surprised about here is the risk we are facing with power interruptions. You'll tell me it's not cybersecurity. I'll tell you that, well, it can actually very much be, because we have seen cases where power generation sites, you know, those big CHP, what they call the power generators, were controlled, obviously, via network, and the more our internet is getting into our life, the more this control is getting important. The more integrated grid we see, the more this control is getting important. And to me, when I think cyber risk, more than, you know, identity theft or more than this kind of thing, what actually is to me is a potential huge issue, is having people take control of those power stations, because if we don't have electricity, God, we're dead. We're done. And this is major issue.
What is power gen doing right now to address
the risks that are, or let's call them the highest risks that they're experiencing?
The risk, and it's not only, actually it's not only a cyber risk, because we see also other potential risk factors like weather, like everything. But I strongly believe that just like communication in the past was kind of centralized. You had your phone, and you had the phone, the phone center, and you were calling that center, and then that center was sending you to someone. Now we have the internet. That's great. Power stations so far, and this is very 20th century, and this is very industrial. We have always loved very big things. So we had huge power stations. And the bigger the better, because we have a big nuclear power plant, and the big nuclear power plant, or coal-fired or oil-fired, whatever. But we have those power plants, and they literally generate power for the whole region. So it's very easy to actually target this power plant and shut it down by getting into its control systems. The primary solution for that is developing a grid, developing what today we call a smart grid, because there are other factors, other aspects that beyond simply the control of those. But having a grid of distributed power generation that can relay each other if one fails, in a way, it makes the cyber risk probably as dangerous in a way, because, well, those different power stations have to be connected to each other, because they are controlled, and they need to be aware of what's happening with the other ones. But on the other hand, it means that we definitely are able to spread the risk of having one fail over several of them. And this to me, this is the primary solution.
So wait, so I need to ask, so what topping do you equate that to?
Oh, well, we have the crust. That's definitely tomato, because it's the one that comes right on top of it, and and that's, again, it's one of the very, very important bases for our life: electricity, water, and the air we breathe.
So I would have actually said maybe the oven, because depending on how you cook it, a wood-fired oven, or not to steal your thunder, because you're talking about electricity and power and all that, but
well,
I just wanted to make sure. That was my thought.
Yeah, no, definitely something. It really is something that's critical. I mean, we have identity theft. We have people who will steal your money over your bank account, over the internet. Well, you don't die if something like well, it may happen, but it's not lethal. When it's really, really cold outside and you have no power to heat your house, wow, now we're talking about a serious problem. So that's really important. That's the way I feel it.
We have a similar problem in where we live, and I think other states with similar climates, or in the US. So it gets very hot here. I think we topped out 116 degrees. And so if air conditioners aren't working, that's a problem. So we see it on both sides of the spectrum. But interestingly enough, this topic is something I'm not super familiar with, but where I'm located is right next to the transmission control for all the power on the West Coast, west of the Mississippi, as they generally control that. And so I have people who I know who work there, and they're often talking about the issue of controlling power transmission, because especially in solar. So when power is sent back to the grid, they could actually take down the grid, right? If there's too much power generation coming from solar. So we know that there's a lot of challenges within, let's call it energy in general, but I think you're right on with the bigger risk is, nothing moves without power. Like nothing moves without power. So you certainly can't work remotely if you don't have any power. That's for sure. So I would equate a power outage or a serious cyber attack the same as the internet going down, really, to some degree. In a lot of situations, people just won't be able to access it. So
exactly. Even cars now. Think about it. We have, when we look at the energy profile, if we look at the whole planet Earth, there's about 20,000 terawatt hour of power generated by the grid. Not power, sorry, energy per year. So 20,000 terawatt hour energy, electricity per year on the globe. The energy being used for transportation, so of course we're talking oil, primarily oil, of course, is 30,000 terawatt hour. And so in theory, until now, you can still drive your car even if there's no power. Well, this is changing.
Yeah,
This is changing, and we're talking about electrifying everything. I don't exactly know when it is, but I heard that California was trying to ban the gas ovens. How am I going to be cooking my pizza? Seriously, is it with an electric oven?
Wood fired. Wood fired.
Wood fired.
We have to do
we
wood
have
then.
wood fires in California,
Yeah.
and you know,
Yeah.
not the kind we want. We definitely cook the pizza. The concern always, though, that we're faced with is, well, every industry and every profession has something that keeps you up at night. What's yours?
We are having a big problem, and this problem is unfortunately universal. We have 2 billion tons of waste going to landfills every year. 2 billion tons. That's huge. We don't know what to do with our waste. To be perfectly honest, is this keeping me up at night? Literally, not exactly. However, when I take my car, I drive down the hill, go to buy my grocery. I see litter, I see waste on the side of the road. I take, just like every normal human being, I take my waste, I put my waste into garbage bins. I see and I know because this is what I'm doing, for a living. I know that the waste that goes into the blue bin, the one that is supposed to be recycled, I know that 80% of that will actually end up to landfills. And before we move to the East Coast, my wife and I are thinking of going to Mexico on vacation, to an absolutely gorgeous place called Holbox. And Holbox is an island northwest of Cancun on the Yucatan Peninsula.
Oh.
And it's like a postcard. You have the palm trees, you have the blue sea, you have the white sand beaches, etc. But right in the middle of this island, if you look at it on Google satellite, there's literally all of the waste of the island that is piled up, waiting to be taken first by a truck, then by a boat, and then by another truck to a landfill inside Yucatan. The problem is, over there, unlike California, there we have rainy seasons. And so when it rains, this landfill, this pile of garbage is literally nicely floating, on river. Well, it becomes a river actually, and is sent to the Caribbean Sea. God, this is a nightmare. And this, yes, keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I was actually just in the Philippines, and they're having the same issue there because it's 7,000 islands, and so anytime you've got an island and you've got a load of people, the amount of plastic that ends up in the landfills or actually in the ocean is atrocious. Let's put it that way.
Well, there's an old cliche: out of sight, out of mind. I suffer from that. I had no idea. So that's so I learned something new from both of you. I think that's one of the interesting things about these kinds of problems, that one would expect that there would be some mechanism, regulation, or something of that nature that would help address that, which I'm sure, even if they do exist, they're difficult to enforce. But at least in terms of regulatory issues, I'm sure that in what you do today, that there are regulations that impact you. So what are those regulations that concern you, that you have to think about in your day-to-day?
There are two kinds of regulations. The regulations I love and the regulations that make my life difficult. And it's also important to talk about the regulations we love, because after all, we need some kind of order in our life, right? And there is a regulation I love, which is, and again, we're talking about California. It is the state bill 1383, 1383. And in vernacular words, it is the landfill diversion mandate. And it is a regulation that tells the waste processing industry that they have to literally divert, I'm sorry, I'm not sure which is the right pronunciation. But anyway, 70% of the organic waste that today is going to landfills has to be sent elsewhere. And it's great news because we have a problem. And again, this is part of the problem that keeps me up at night. And this is worldwide. John, you mentioned Philippines, I mentioned Mexico. We don't even need to go that far to find the same problem. Western Europe, the US, Asia, everywhere. Landfills are literally getting filled to the brim. And a lot of those landfills not only are full, but most of them are greenhouse gas emitters, which means, and they are one of the worst greenhouse gas emitters because they emit methane. And methane is, depending on how you calculate that, it's between 20 and 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So it really bad. It is bad stuff. And on top of that, landfills, when it rains over a landfill, there's that water exactly just like when you make coffee in the morning, that water goes through the landfill, and what you get at the bottom of the landfill is some sort of a black, horrible juice that has taken all the contaminants in the waste, and that in a lot of cases, literally pour through the landfill and gets inside the ground. And when you have an aquifer under the ground, this contamination goes to your water source. This is bad. This is very bad. And so diverting as much as you can from landfills must be a worldwide challenge and goal, because we really do have a problem with those landfills. Of course, the other pathway is potentially burning all that stuff. And here again, we have smell, we have CO2 that's directly emitted to the atmosphere. We have other contaminants that we don't want to talk about, and we better not talk about because we'll get sued by all sorts of people. It is a massive problem.
That requires solutions. So what solution are you working on to help address the problem, if any at all?
Well, and talking about regulations, obviously, and luckily enough, there are regulations that are trying to curb down these issues, of course. So landfills are controlled, emissions are controlled. There's a whole array of regulations that really, fortunately, make our life easier. But, well, reality is that it is not enough. And actually, this is what we do. This is what we do every day. We have designed a solution that takes this organic waste. And when I say organic, this also includes plastic. So the plastic that is floating on the ocean can be treated by our process. And so this process takes this organic waste, biomass, textile, leather, paper, cardboard, plastics, and heats it up without oxygen to turn that into a gas that actually is a mix of several gas streams, one of them being hydrogen. And this hydrogen, so our process is designed so that we can maximize hydrogen production. So we really push so that all the hydrogen that is contained in the feedstock will actually be recovered. And then that hydrogen, our proposal is to use this hydrogen as a fuel for vehicles, for clean mobility, because the best way to use hydrogen is to put it into a device called a fuel cell. And the fuel cell, it's a little piece of equipment where you inject the hydrogen on one side, you have air on the other side, and what goes out is electricity and water. This is perfect. and you can literally drink that water because it's super pure. Hydrogen and oxygen recombine to make water. So that fuel cell, if it is in a car, it means that you put hydrogen into a tank, into the car, that hydrogen goes to the fuel cell, generates electricity, and then you have an electric car that does not need to wait 30 minutes to be fully charged. It takes about 5 minutes to charge it. And if you don't have a hydrogen car nearby, what you can do is put this hydrogen into a bigger stationary fuel cell where you can feed the grid. And this is distributed. It's a way to get rid of our waste, get rid of it in a clean manner, and it is a way to generate energy that will be super clean because it literally emits zero CO2.
Wow, it sounds like it's a no-brainer, but I'm sure that's not at the same time. What are some of the barriers that have made it difficult for adoption?
We are back to regulation. For example, I'm sorry, it looks like I'm only talking about California, but well, not only California, but several jurisdictions actually do not consider processes like ours as a pathway to process waste. Meaning that if you are a waste processing company in California, you cannot use our system because you will not get the permit from the required authorities because our process, and there are about a dozen companies like us who have similar, of course ours is the best, but that have similar processes. So it's not possible today to get a permit to process waste using our solution. And it really is only a legal matter. It's because, and we can't really blame them. History has been landfills and incineration. So far, it was kind of okay with it. We must keep in mind that we did not realize for a long time. We have not realized that incinerating waste was bad for the environment. Just like at some point of time, a long time ago, everyone was thinking that smoking a cigarette was good for health. So it's really important to keep the context, keep history in context, and keep the background. So again, I don't blame California authorities for that. The solutions like ours were not really needed, or they thought they didn't need it. What would we have done with the hydrogen? Because there was no hydrogen fuel cell cars. There was no stationary fuel cells to generate power for the grid. So we need to see this evolution. We need to have the authorities and the regulatory bodies to catch up with the necessary evolution that we are witnessing right now.
Well, I can tell you that the challenge, the legal challenge that you speak of is often a barrier in many ways in terms of the regulatory issues. So of course the bigger challenge is, adoption. And it's been very interesting living in Sacramento, close to where a lot of the where the lawmakers are really for our state, as well as some of the agencies and associations. I mean, they're all here, right? They're gonna be close to the Capitol. Sometimes the answer is, just it's simpler than we think it is. Not trying to defend, what we're doing in the halls of legislature here in California, but what I have learned is that sometimes it takes practical application and for people to see the light. So, can you think of a scenario where you might be able to turn some heads to have maybe an agency or a lawmaker recognize the value in this process and how you can substantially move the needle?
Absolutely. We do recognize it takes time. And again, I will never say it enough. I can't blame any agency for being too cautious. After all, we need to be careful about what we do, even with our regulation. Yes, my life would be easier if I could install systems wherever I want, whenever I want, doing whatever we want. But we have to be realistic here, and there has to be a legal framework. There has to be a regulatory framework, and it is the role. You'll tell me I'm a socialist. Well, I'm French. it's the government, it's the authorities' role to give some sort of structure to all this. Otherwise, what we would end up, okay, well, some people on the political spectrum will tell you, oh, everything nature can take care of itself, and let enterprises do their job, and it will naturally be perfect. I don't believe in that. I really truly think that there is a need for governance, there is a need for authority, there is a need for frameworks, because you cannot, I mean, okay, here in California, all right, we are in the Far West. But the Far West today in the 21st century is not exactly the Far West that it was, in the movies.
That's for sure. Well, can you share with us perhaps some of the events that you go to become a specialist in what it is that you focus on, or other events that, or even books that you might recommend for any of our listeners?
If we talk about events, I'm going to be boring, but last week, no, actually it's this week. It was Monday and Tuesday. I was here in Los Angeles at an event called Sustainable Plastics. I'm of course kind of familiar with the subject, but I was fascinated seeing how much progress there has been in the field of bioplastics. In other words, the 300 or so million tons of plastics being produced every year on Earth, a lot of it, not enough, you'll tell me, but a lot of it is now actually coming out of renewable sources, and this is great because this is exactly what we need. Being a bioplastic doesn't necessarily mean that it is biodegradable. So even bioplastics will end up in the ocean. So this is where we come, and this is where we have our solution. But it really is good news to see that there are several industries that are really getting into this sustainable thing. Next week I'll be in Houston, Texas, for the World Hydrogen Conference, North America. So this week I was talking about our feedstock, and next week I'll be talking about what goes out of our machine.
Somebody that I know through another parent who works for the DMV and my son's school, I know that they're attending that conference. Somebody from the DMV is attending that conference, mainly because of hydrogen fuel cells for vehicles.
Certainly. Well, so, it's fascinating to see every time I take my car, I drive down the highway, literally every time I will see a fuel cell car. And that's great. That's great. Of course, it is still one among gazillions of cars, but it's coming. And we need to keep history in perspective. And we are really living a moment now that is, in my opinion, that is similar to the time when we switched from horses to to cars. And now, well, we don't have horses, but we are literally switching from fossil fueled thermal engine vehicles to electric vehicles. And those vehicles can be battery electric, can be fuel cell electric, but no matter what, they are electric. And that makes a big difference. And we are literally witnessing this moment now, which takes me to your other question about the books I read and that I recommend. There is a book that I found quite recently, about 2-3 months ago, I think. It's a book called The Sovereign Individual, and I probably need to find you the authors. It was written right at the end of the last century, so 1999, I think, or something. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's a book that describes how the whole society, because of internet, because of at that time they were more predicting it than witnessing it, but how the internet and the evolution of politics and cryptocurrencies are changing people's daily life to a point where the whole concept of nation, the whole concept of country is literally being turned turned over, not turned down, but turned over. And it's fascinating to read this book because it was written 20 years ago, and a lot of what they were saying, this may happen, this may take place, etc., has actually taken place and is taking place right now.
I'll be looking into that book in particular because I guess the best way to describe it is an internet junkie in terms of its history. Internet history junkie is the better way to say it. So, and progress and how things are evolving, do matter. So, yeah, I'll be interested in picking that one up. So, as far as we normally have a question about what excites you about the future, but I think you've already covered that. I mean, with the to some degree, I think that I would agree that electric vehicles, but is there something else that excites you about the future that you wanted to bring up?
I built my first waste to hydrogen system prototype over 20 years ago, and I've been involved closely or more remotely in this whole hydrogen thing for over 25 years. What really excites me is the moment where I'm going to be able to push a button and literally start my car that has been fueled by hydrogen that I have been producing with the waste that was gathered in the neighborhood. What we do here is circular economy, and I want to see that happen, and that excites me a lot.
All right. Well, I think one of the things that we want to make sure we also cover is, kind of on the lighter side, tell us a little bit more about, tell us a little about what do you like to do to outside of work, right? And when you're not, solving problems, and, tell us a little about yourself, I guess is the question.
A lot of things. Same thing. You go to Instagram or you go on the net and you see all these entrepreneurs who tell you have to work 24/7. Well, no, I don't think so at all. And I'm really trying to keep a good balance between what I do. Well, my work is my passion. There's no doubt about that. But my work is not my whole life. What I like doing is, I love cooking, I love reading, I love walking in the woods with my wife. I love, there's nothing that I love more than when I come back home, right at the entrance of our house on the driveway, there's a huge eucalyptus. There's nothing better than opening the window and smelling, having the fragrance of the eucalyptus when it's in the morning. This is great. This is worth, I don't know, well, a lot of things. So I guess what's really important to me is keeping a good balance of everything.
I can relate to right at the front of my house, we had a beautiful weeping willow, right? Just a gorgeous tree. And then one day I came home and the homeowners association had cut it down. One of the disadvantages of having a homeowners association. My story isn't, it doesn't end as well as yours. You still get to, see your eucalyptus tree, but I guess that's a part of the equation of when you have a homeowners association that controls everything in front of your house. So
yeah, I remember about 30 years ago, I was living in Tokyo, Japan at that time, and I have a good friend here who lives in Hollywood, and I was living right in the center of Tokyo, and really Japan has done a great job taking care of the environment, of the air, etc. But I still have here in my nose it was absolutely wonderful when I was arriving at Lax Airport. He would come pick me up, take me to his house, and right in front of his house there are 3 cypresses. And being in a city, okay, it's LA, but it is a city, and literally smelling the trees. That to me, that was absolutely wonderful. And this is one of the things actually that made me want to come and live in Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, yeah. Where I live in Sacramento, we're considered the 3rd most treed metropolitan area in the country. So
I didn't know that.
I think LA is up there too as well. So I may have missed one of our questions here, which is if you could go back and talk to the younger version of yourself and give yourself advice, what would it be?
I wouldn't even try. I wouldn't even try doing that. I mean, my younger self wasn't listening to anyone, anything.
The best answer we've had so far.
That is absolutely the best.
It really is.
Well, honestly, and well, I have no regret. That sounds very vain, probably. But first, I wouldn't try, and second, I'm really happy with what happened so far. So why complain, really?
What comes to mind is not vain, but practical. I think a lot of you look at your childhood. You know, what did we really listen to? You know, the stove is hot, but I touched it anyway, even though my mom warned me, just like anybody else. Great. So how do people find you?
Primarily LinkedIn,
okay,
because I'm not on any other social media. You know, I'm 60 years old, so the information age is something. You know, I grew up where we had a phone with a dial. So I'm LinkedIn. LinkedIn is perfect. It's enough. I can focus on that. And of course, our website for the company. There's a little piece of a little place where you can send messages. But LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And we also will have some of this information in the podcast. So you're gonna be obviously any listeners, you can find that information here in this podcast. Jean-Louis, I think your website is ways2h.com as well. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be on Pineapple on Pizza. I think John had a few problems on his side. He disconnected a few times. We'll just blame it on power outages. So since we talked about that earlier, but we really, it's generally not the norm for either of us to have issues. So we apologize. Sometimes when we travel, we can't always get the most reliable internet connection, and John is traveling at the moment. But
that explains.
So for our listeners, this has been another great episode of Pineapple on Pizza with your hosts, John, George, and maybe later Ringo and Paul. We'll see. But for now, it's just John and George, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for joining another great episode of Pineapple on Pizza. You can find show notes, links, and resources by visiting omnistruct.com/blog. And a huge thank you to all who are preventatively protecting organizations from cyber threats.